And that has to do with triggers. So here's an example of what I went through in my life that helped me to understand this. So and I'll give you two examples of this. So I grew up when my mother remarried, or not yeah, she did remarry because she was married once before, but it wasn't to my father. But my mother remarried when I was like 4 or 5 years old, and she married this guy. This was a Hispanic guy. He was like from El Salvador, and his name is Pedro, and he was an asshole. He was using her for his green card, and he just treated her like shit, and he treated me like shit. And he was very abusive, very much physically, emotionally, etc. The whole 9 yards, and the family hated his ass. But anyways, but I always wanted his love. I always wanted him to treat me like a son because I didn't have a father. I grew up without a father. I used to cry to my mom when I was a kid. Why won't my father meet me? Why won't he see me? Why won't he come and see me? If he just saw me, I know he'll love me. And so I would cry sometimes, come home from school and cry that I didn't have a father. And so she felt bad, and I think she felt pressure as well. So when they got together and they got married, I thought I was going to have a dad now. I thought he was going to be my father and was going to treat me the way a father would treat a son. He didn't. He hated me. He hated me because I wasn't his kid, and he hated me because he felt like I was in the way. And so he just mistreated me. And so I always wanted that love, and I never got it from him. And so I mean, this is the kind of person that he was. I wanted a pet bird, and he took a piece of wood and he threw it at a blue jay in the tree. The blue jay fell, was alive for maybe a couple of days, and he says, "Here you go. Here's your bird." Like, that's the kind of person this was. So this is not a kind person. This was not a good person internally. And so what ended up happening is that as I got older, and I was going into relationships, and I was dating guys, and I was trying to find love, like most people are trying to find that like, you know, imaginary love that we all see on TV. I found myself drawn to a certain type, and then I ended up at some point dating a guy. It was my ex, a guy who his family was from El Salvador. He had very similar traits and qualities as the stepfather, and I fell in love with this guy, and he gave me that love. That I thought that's what I was wanting, or that's what I was needing. But along with that also came forms of abuse. And so it was a repeating pattern. And the reason why it repeated is because a part of me after my stepfather was out of the picture was broken inside. It was not okay. And it was desiring for healing and for recovery from that trauma. And so my heart was seeking out any person that could help give me an opportunity to recover myself or to overcome a similarity to that relationship, so that I could move past it and I can grow from it. And I ended up in a relationship with someone very similar to my stepfather. So it was a repeating pattern. It became a repeating pattern. And so that's one example of it. The second example was when I first started building my business. The first time I went into business was with a very good friend of mine. We had been friends for like 10 years. And she was a Reiki practitioner. She was a teacher. She was also a masseuse. And we had been friends for so long, and she knew what I could do psychically. And so at that time in my life, my abilities were switched off. They were not really cooperating or working with me. Every time I would try to sense and so forth, it wasn't working. And so I kind of gave up on trying to be a psychic and a medium. And I said to myself, well, if I can't be a psychic or medium, then I need to get into something in this industry, because I still want to be part of this industry. I don't want to just do regular work for a living. And at that time, she was teaching Reiki, and she offered to teach me a Reiki class, my Reiki. And so she taught me, and she certified me in Reiki, and I stuck with her. And I decided to do like an internship with her. And I interned with her for about a year, meaning that she taught me about, you know, hands-on Reiki and doing it with clients and so forth. So I practiced for about a year. And during that year, I learned a lot. I grew, and I was able to build a following of people who were coming to me for Reiki, not consistently, but enough where it was starting to generate income for me. And I was earning about $500, $600 a month. And so that was enough for me to like use that towards other things. But at that time I was like, I really want to have my own practice. I want to be able to do this for a living. And so she was needing a bigger space. I was needing a space. And we decided we were going to go into business together. Well, we went into business together. I came in with my Starbucks background and all these marketing strategies to just promote ourselves, promote the practice, promote the business, etc. But it was a bad decision on my part. It was a mistake to do that because that was pretty much the beginning of the end of our friendship, because there were some shady things that happened in that whole situation, and I didn't want my business to be represented by all of these shady things that were going on with that, or with her business. So I decided to disconnect myself from that, and so there I was starting my business with someone, and I found myself compensating for their lacks or for what they were missing in the business. And instead of focusing on building my business up, I was focused on stabilizing and helping them build their business. So when I left that situation, I was looking for a new space. And I met another person, I met another lady, and as we started to get to know each other, and she had a spare space in her studio, and she was a hairstylist. And so I decided, okay, well, let me rent out the space and I can do readings from there. And so I started to do that. It literally was a duplicate and a repeat of that exact same situation with the prior friend, where I tried to help somebody else out. I ended up helping them out more than I was helping myself. So I found myself doing more for their business, trying to get their business. I mean, I was literally cleaning her salon when I wasn't working. Like, that was what was going on there. And so things that she should be doing for her business, I was like making it so that clients would come in and they would have a better experience or much more fulfilling experience. And so I was propping up her business and stabilizing her business instead of helping myself. And I ended up in the exact same situation with my old best friend. And I was like, oh my God, this is like the repeat same bullshit that I just went through. And so I realized something in that second time. The third time, I'm hard-headed, so sometimes it takes me a while to learn something. Third time, I started to, at that point, my partner and I came to an agreement that I was going to start working from home. So I started doing business out of my home, out of my house. And that seemed to work for me. But then I met another psychic, and she was very gifted, very good, but she didn't have that business savviness. And so when I first met her, my first inkling, my first desire was, first of all, I said, hey, you're amazing. You're really good, but you can totally take your business to the next level. And so I offered to help her. And at first she was very suspicious of me because I guess, and I can understand that. Sometimes when you meet people and they just want to help you, you can be very suspicious. Like, what's your hidden intention or what's your agenda? I didn't really have an agenda or an intention. I just saw how good she was and I wanted to help her, and I knew enough about business. And it wasn't like I was gonna, wasn't gonna cost me anything to give them business advice. Being a store manager for Starbucks for many years, I knew business. So, I offered to help her and ended up doing a hell of a lot more, and I was taking away time from my business. So I bought photography equipment so that we could take professional pictures for her. And I gave her a bunch of stuff from my old studio space so that she could use it to fill in the empty spaces in her office, because her office was just 4 walls. There was nothing there. So when I got through with it, or when I gave her all this stuff from my old studio space, it looked like the ambiance was nice and everything. So I did all these things. So basically I became this person again, trying to help them with their business, and I was taking away time from my business, and I was repeating the same thing all over again. I realized that after that, at that point, my partner said, like, what the hell is wrong with you? You keep trying to help these people. You need to let them figure things out on their own. It's like, stop trying to do everything for everybody. Like, just do your thing. Focus on your business. And that was around the time where I started to get serious with my business. And then that's when it took off. It only took 1 year, but it took off within a year. But it took me figuring that out. And I had to go through several years of figuring that out, and then realizing what I was doing and why, and then being more selfish, intentionally focusing on my business so that I could build it up. And that's when it changed for me. So whenever you're repeating these cycles or these patterns of behavior, it's because there's something in it that you're still learning about yourself, not about the relationship or not about the situation, about yourself, that you just are having the hardest time implementing or making that switch. And so if you are finding yourself repeating the same kinds of relationships, then there's something that you're repeating or doing that has not changed. And in the way you're operating, the way you're behaving, the way you're acting regarding that person. And that's just going to be a repeating pattern, whether it be a relationship or a romantic relationship or a friendship or a family relationship. But it's a repeating pattern, and there's something there that you're supposed to gain from it, or that you're healing through that experience. Doesn't mean you should stick with it or you should continue to sustain it, because it's only there for that lesson. It's for a lesson, it's for a season, it's for a reason. So that's the reason why that tends to happen. So once you start to catch the themes and the repeating patterns, you can start to work on that within yourself. It's not easy, because it requires you to reinvent yourself and to change what you're used to being. And the people around you who are used to you being one way are going to have a cow whenever you decide to change on them. But it's necessary for you to move forward and to let go of this old energy and to change your state of being. Well, yeah, shine be you. I constantly pick up on people's energy so much. I don't want to be around crowds. Now, is this a bad thing? I don't want to isolate myself. Here's the thing. When you choose to help people as something in your life, if you choose for that to be something in your life's work, you have no choice but to mix and exchange energy with people. The only way you're going to be able to be there for other people is if you allow yourself to have that exchange of energy. Now, you can reduce it so that you're limiting how much of it you're going to interact with and engage with. I know from experience that when I had an in-person practice and I had people who were coming to see me in person, it was a hell of a lot more energy, and it was so much more draining for me after I was done working. And so I didn't prefer that. And when I moved everything over to online only, it acted as a boundary or barrier so that I wouldn't have as much energy exchanged. There's still a hell of a lot more energy being exchanged, but it's nowhere near the amount as it was before. Because when you have that close proximity to someone in person, there's just a hell of a lot more energy. And I actually found that I was more accurate as a psychic when I did it over the phone or over the video calls than in person. And the reason why is because when you're sitting with someone in person, their energy field is extending out, and as a sensitive, your energy is extending out, and there's an intermixing that's happening there. So you're not just tuning in from an objective perspective at that point, you're also taking on all of that person's emotional baggage. And psychics have a tendency of changing their answers because of what the client prefers, and so they adjust themselves, and then they are wrong when it doesn't happen. And so that's why I actually don't prefer in-person sessions, because that person's emotional energy can be so overwhelming. And as an empath, because that's how I started off as an empath, that person's emotional energy can overwhelm you, and immediately you're going to start to struggle with what you're actually sensing versus what's going on with that person and what they prefer. Now, and if you'll ever notice now when I do readings for people, or I tune in and do a psychic reading for someone, I don't look at them anymore. I try not to look at them in the face, because I don't want their visual or I don't want their emotional physical stuff to interfere with what I'm sensing. Because when I'm telling someone something that I'm sensing and I'm feeling the pieces and I'm trying to bring it together into some cohesive idea or some cohesive theory or prediction, I have to pay attention to what's going on in my head and what I'm getting. And if I'm too focused on that person's physical appearance, the faces they're making, people will make faces and not realize that they're making these faces. And so when you say to someone, something to someone, and they're like, and that's going to shut you down, and it's going to affect your ability to sense. That's why I just choose not to look at people, just because it's a waste of my energy. It's not going to help me in any way, shape, or form. Mediumship is a different story. With mediumship, you can look someone in the face because you're going to get what you're going to get. They may still give you faces, but it's somebody, your energy is coming from the spirit, not from the person that you're reading. But when I'm doing psychic readings, it's a different story. You're really caught up in that person's energy field, and you can take on that energy and those preferences, and then that'll force people to change their answers. And so I found myself being much more accurate and much more precise when I started doing phone or just video calls or e-readings, because it allowed me to have such a level of objectivity that I was not invested in the outcome. I was not invested in the final call that I was going to make with that. I wasn't invested in that. I was just sharing what I was getting. And that's why I look elsewhere. Well, two reasons. I look elsewhere because everything in my brain is so, it's happening so fast and it's complex that it's hard for me to pay attention to a person and not be drawn in by the person and then focus on this at the same time. So I have to look elsewhere and figure it out because I'm trying to figure it out in my head. So I have to pay attention to what's going on in my head, which is why I tend to look elsewhere anyways. And so that's why I do it that way. I don't want to be I don't want interference from the person that I'm reading anyways, but I prefer not doing it in person. But I avoid crowds. I avoid like heavily populated places because it's part of the, it's part of the thing. You know, it's like a gynecologist. A gynecologist, he might spend all day looking at women's vaginas and giving them diagnoses. He doesn't want to go home and have sex with his wife. And so he's going to avoid that, or he doesn't have a high sex drive, most like a gynecologist that I know of. But that's just the way, it's an occupational hazard. So if you are going to do anything in this world that has to do with people and their lives and caring about their situations or just helping them, you're going to take on their energy. You have to know that that's just a given, but you have to find ways of expressing it or releasing it. And so for myself, after I'm done with these, my energy drops drastically, and I can find myself very much just not wanting to interact or engage with people. So I do shut down a little more. But once I go for my walk, or if I vape, that helps me sometimes too. Going for my walk, watching, you know, a show that gets me caught up in it, that can totally shake me out of that energy exchange, so that I'm no longer being affected by them as well.